When it comes to motorcycle crashes, there are some things in our control and some things that are not in our control. Now, I've made that argument before here on MCrider that there's usually more things in our control that we can do to reduce the chances of being involved in a crash, and one of them is speed. Why is speed such a contributing factor when it comes to motorcycle fatalities? Well, we're going to look at it this week on MCrider, and towards the middle of this video, we'll conduct an experiment to help illustrate the point. You know, every year riders die on motorcycle because of what I like to call speed differential. That's the difference in speed between you and the traffic around you. It's too simple of an answer just to say slow down to be safer on a motorcycle. Here in DFW, if you get out on one of the local highways and simply slow down as a means to be safer, I believe from personal experience that you're at a higher risk than that rider who's riding with the flow of traffic. So I believe speed is relative to the flow of traffic around you, and if traffic's flowing at 75 miles per hour on average, I believe the safest speed is 75 miles per hour or maybe even slightly faster. I know for me in DFW, if the average rate of speed of traffic around me is 75 and I'm riding at 75 to 78 miles per hour, when I do this, I have much fewer interactions with other vehicles than if I'm riding at 60 miles per hour on the same highway. Fewer interactions with other vehicles relates directly to reduced risk. So to just use the blanket statement, slow down, in my opinion, is not a correct answer, but sometimes slowing down is excellent advice. You know, it's easier to gauge what the flow of traffic is here in DFW because there's so many cars to use as a gauge. But what about when you're riding out on some two-lane country road? You know, there are not nearly as many cars, so it's much harder to tell what the flow of traffic for that particular road would be or the expected speed of traffic will be on these types of roads. In those situations, the speed limit for that given road is your best guide. The speed limit will be the general expectation of your rate of speed when other cars see you or they're waiting on you out on the road. So if a car is waiting to turn left out on a two-lane road and they see a truck approaching in the distance, they expect that truck to be traveling at or around the speed limit. Because of the size of the truck, it's much easier to tell how fast that truck is approaching and the relative speed of that truck. The driver uses that information to determine if they have time to pull out onto the highway. That same driver, waiting on that same two-lane road to turn out on it, they see a motorcycle approaching in the distance. Because of the size of the motorcycle and the much smaller profile, it's much more difficult to tell how fast that motorcycle is approaching, and it's much more difficult to see that motorcycle to begin with. A motorcycle going significantly faster than the expected speed will not provide as clear of a visual picture for the driver waiting to turn as a truck will or a car will. Look at these two videos again. Notice how much more of a visual impact and presence that truck has on the same road as the motorcycle. When we're riding, we have that small profile of the motorcycle. We are harder to see, and it's harder for cars to judge our speed. So if you're riding much faster than the speed limit, you put yourself at greater risk of a car misjudging your speed and also giving yourself time to do something about it if they do pull out in front of you. In many ways, we're our own worst enemy out on the road. You know, we like to talk about car drivers not paying attention or cars pulling in front of us or some stupid driver looking at their cell phone while we drive at 2 or 3 times the speed relative to the traffic around us or well over the speed limit. You know, as many of you know, I recently got an Indian Challenger. One of the first things I like to do when I get a new motorcycle is join some forums and Facebook groups that are dedicated to that particular motorcycle. You know, you can learn a whole lot about a particular bike just by joining some of these groups. And you can find options that you might be interested in and great tips on that motorcycle in general or if there's particular issues with the motorcycle. One of the most recommended changes that I see to the Indian Challenger is to get the engine revamped or to get it retuned. You know, it's got some obvious advantages as it allows the motorcycle to run a little cooler and it runs less lean than it does from the factory. But one of the big reasons that I see that many riders are getting their Challenger tuned is because they can remove that 110 mile per hour limiter placed on the engine with the factory tune. So Indian limits the top speed of the Challenger to 110 miles per hour in the engine mapping. One of the features of engine remapping or tuning on this particular motorcycle is to remove that limit. Now, I'm sure some of this is just for bravado's sake and some of it's just for bragging rights, but I'm sure that some of these riders get out on the road and they're dissatisfied with their stock motorcycle because the factory tuning only allows it to get up to 110 miles per hour. These are some of the riders that make up the chart that we'll look at now. So these numbers are from the NHTSA when they looked at the driving records of those involved in fatal crashes in 2017. They compared numbers between motorcycles, cars, and light and heavy trucks. For simplicity in this video, we'll just look at cars and motorcycles, but here's the full chart. Of all of these riders and drivers who were involved in fatal crashes, 20.3% of the motorcyclists involved had been in a previous crash compared to 19.1% of cars. So more motorcycles had been in a previous crash before they had their fatal crash. 5.4% of these motorcyclists had DWI convictions in the past, compared to 3.5% of the car drivers involved in the fatal crash. 24.6% of the motorcyclists had prior speeding convictions, compared to 20.1% of car drivers. And 21.1% of motorcyclists had their license revoked or suspended in the past, compared to 16.6% of cars. You know, you got to do a whole lot of bad driving to get your license suspended. And a fairly large number of these riders who were involved in fatal crashes, 21.1%, had their license suspended prior to dying on their vehicle. So you tell me, who's our biggest threat out on the road? We are. There's never been a better application of the phrase, we met the enemy and he is us. It applies for motorcyclists as well as it does for any other factor. You know, there are many contributing factors to a crash where we are our own worst enemy. Driving under the influence is one of them. I believe it's probably the biggest one. But our speed differential is without a doubt a huge contributing factor to the loss of life of many in our riding community. You know, I can sum it up with one phrase, one of my favorite phrases, save it for the track. I've got no problem with speed on a motorcycle, on the track. The roads are no place to get that out of your system. The risks are simply too high. You know, if you enjoyed this video, consider becoming a member and help me produce more videos just like this. Till next week, guys, it's Kevin with MCrider, and I'll see you on the road.